Hey everyone, Britta Albert here. If this is your first time here, I'm a spiritual transformational life coach. It's my goal for this channel to help you overcome the obstacles that are standing in the way of you living your best and most authentic life. In today's video, we're continuing on with this little mini series that I'm doing, and that is to explain this recent trauma, recovery, and healing that I went through the past 6 weeks. If you have not seen my first video, I recommend checking that video out as well. It's going to help you understand some of the foundational things that have led up to this video. Trauma looks different for different people and different situations. Trauma isn't always a big event that jars your very core. Trauma can be keeping a secret. Trauma can be self-imposed. Trauma is anything that digs its talons deep within who you are, and it becomes the foundation for belief systems that hold you back in your life. The next kind of trauma that I learned I carried, that I had no idea I was even carrying, came from a very unlikely source. Depending on when you're watching this video, you may or may not remember when the country was on fire in 2020. If you're watching this shortly after I post it or the day that I post it, this is still very raw and still applicable in some parts of the country. A few short weeks ago, most of the west coast of the United States was on fire. Again, from the previous video, understanding that I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, there's a lot of people that I know out there. Now, seasonal fires, they're nothing new. Anybody on the West Coast can tell you that, especially if you live in areas that are more prone to fires. A few years back, the Columbia Gorge caught on fire, and that was devastating and very, very sad for me, being across the country, to see that these places that I went and hiked were destroyed by a fire. But even then, that was, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I grew up. So although it was close to home, it wasn't actually close to home. However, this time, these fires, it was. This is the first time in my adult life that I had seen something like that, and the pictures were simply apocalyptic, and I'm not going to post them here. Feel free to Google them. It won't be hard to find. I was so grateful to be in South Carolina and to breathe the clean air and see the blue sky. And in my gratitude, I ran almost every day outside. But it made my heart ache for home. It made my heart ache for the place that raised me. Regardless of the pain, regardless of the loss, that area of the country raised me. There were many people that I once knew and called friends who I hadn't spoken to in 10, 15, 18 years. And it just built this burning desire, no pun intended, to reach out to several people from my past. And I was just truly allowing Spirit to lead me. I would think of a few people and I would contact them, and I would remember other people, and if I couldn't contact them, I would try to remember who their friends were and see if I could find them and hunt people down and go through this rabbit hole of reconnecting. And it was so fun to reminisce and to talk to some of these people. And granted, not everybody was happy to hear from me. Many people were. Some people I still haven't heard back from, and a handful were very not happy to hear from me. But what it did is it allowed me to have a conversation I never even knew was a perspective that existed. I reached out to somebody who I used to be incredibly close with, and I hadn't talked to this person in, oh my goodness, at least 10 years. As he and I were reminiscing and catching up, he said something that just blew my mind. And he said that he still blamed himself for me dating around our friend group. I had no idea what he was talking about. So I asked him to explain. And he explained it in a way that made so much sense now in my 30s that I could not see when I was 15. He explained that when he first met me, he had a crush on me, and he spent months talking about me over and over and over and over again. This group of guys that were our friends. And he said that he thinks that it just stuck. And what happens when somebody passionately talks about something over and over and over again? How cool it is, how awesome it is, how much fun they have, or whatever the situation is. People start to get curious, male or female. But when you have this guy and he's talking about this girl, and he goes on and on and on and on and does not stop, it piqued some interest. This was the first step that caused all of this to start to unfold, that caused all of this healing to start to manifest, and for me to, for the first time, stop running from those memories in my life and face them with a different perspective. For 18 years, I have had guilt about my high school experience. Now, this is when I went to public school. You'll remember how terrified I was. And when I came to this new school, I had one friend who had gone to the private school with me. She was a year younger than me, so she was going in her freshman year, and I was going in my sophomore year. Because of that, we were not in any of the same classes, nor did we have the same lunch. And I remember that first week of school, as cliche as it sounds, I spent every lunch in the bathroom by myself because I didn't know anybody and nobody was talking to me, and I was the weird girl from private school. These kids had grown up with each other their entire lives. I was too nervous to grab a tray of food and stand there like an idiot and ask a random table if I could sit with them. I hadn't really made friends in my classes yet. There were one or two people that I would talk to, but nobody that I knew well enough to invite myself to sit with them. So the only thing that I could do was to just go sit in the restroom and wait till lunch was over. I had wanted to go to public school so bad, but that first week I was really second guessing my decision. I did have two friends from my private school that were still there, and we'd gotten pretty close freshman year, and I missed them at least. I had two friends that I had left, and for what? To sit in the bathroom by myself. When I finally had a cafeteria too. I know it seems so simple and so silly, but it was one of those things that I saw on TV and just felt like it might make me a little more normal to experience. So the one girl that I did know from my private school, who was a year younger than me, convinced me that first Friday to go to the school football game, which was our home game. I had never been to a football game before. I never watched football before, so I had zero exposure and zero knowledge, and it did not sound that appealing to me. But she told me that we were gonna have fun and convinced me to go, and I went. Well, again, remember how terrified I was. Her older brother already went to that school, and her older brother was a year older than me. So she was a freshman, I was a sophomore, her brother was a junior. She was not afraid like I was because she already had older siblings who were going to that school, who had left the private school, who she could see and know that it wasn't scary and it wasn't bad. But I was not as easily convinced. Because of my fear, I had become clingy. So clingy that I was annoying. And I can't blame her, but she ended up ditching me so that she could enjoy herself with her new friends, as she should. She was a freshman. Maybe ditching me wasn't the best way to go about it, but I don't blame her at all. This is her high school experience. She just wanted to have fun, and I was definitely smothering. The only other person that I kind of knew was her brother. I don't know that he and I even had more than a couple conversations just when I stayed the night at her house, but he was a familiar face. So after I couldn't find her, I went and I found him. Now, I don't know if he felt bad for me or if I was being clingy and annoying to him as well, but he did one of the most pivotal things of my entire high school experience. He turned to whoever was next to him and introduced me to this guy. I'm gonna refrain from his name just for his privacy. And he started flirting with me, and I had no idea that he was flirting with me. I had no understanding of sexual innuendos or pickup lines, a little bit, but really barely. I watched a little bit of MTV whenever I could get away with it. My parents weren't paying attention, but I did not have very much exposure or understanding of things like that. So he introduces me to another friend. Now, this friend that he introduced me to, I didn't know it at the time, but was pretty much the leader of this group of guys. They're all into sports. They're all kind of your classic jocks, but they're fun and they're funny, and they're also into video games, and they're also into adventures. And you know, I wasn't sure if I was making friends or not. The entire time I'm trying to be a normal person, and how do I fake normal? What does normal look like? What's a normal high school girl? How am I supposed to act? Am I supposed to laugh at their jokes? I don't understand their jokes. I have no idea what they're saying. More than half of the things that they're saying is going over my head, but they're laughing, so I'm gonna laugh because I at least understand basic social cues. So from my perspective, I have no idea what's going on. I'm stressing, trying to seem cool. I'm answering the questions that are asked of me, and I'm just pretty much nodding and smiling and laughing on cue. From his perspective, he thinks we're flirting, and he thinks that it's going well. And I'm wondering, did I make new friends? And he's thinking he wants to be more than friends. We just had fun. And honestly, the two of them introduced me to so many people that night that I couldn't even tell you who all I met that night if I wanted to. It was a blur, and it was so much fun. And it was a high that took me through the whole weekend, and I felt like maybe I had finally made friends. I was scared to put all my eggs in that basket, but I could not wait for Monday to find out, were they just being nice to me because they were friends with my friend's big brother, or did I truly make some new friends? And I apologize about this light. Let me adjust the camera here. That following Monday at school, of course, I don't have any classes with these people because they're a year older than me. But I was hoping I might have lunch with some of them. So at lunchtime, I walk by the cafeteria and I poke my head in the room and I start scanning the tables and I start scanning the line where you pick up your food and trying to see if I recognized anybody that I had met from the football game. And then my heart dropped because I didn't see anybody that I had met from the football game in the cafeteria. And I'm walking past and I'm about to turn the corner where the girls' restroom is to go sit again and just be by myself. And I hear somebody call my name. Now, I wasn't the only Brittany at that school, but when you hear your name, instinctually you just turn. And lo and behold, they were talking to me. It was the second person that I had met, the one that I didn't realize was the actual leader of the group. And I was so excited. And he did not ask me to sit with them at lunch. He told me I would be sitting with them at lunch. And that was the start of how I found myself in a group of friends. Primarily guy friends. And they used to laugh and joke because I didn't understand most of their dirty jokes. But they would never explain to me what they meant. And I used to get really frustrated. And one time I really showed out, and I was really just upset that they kept making me the butt of their jokes and laughing at the fact that I didn't understand. But yet nobody was explaining it to me. And no matter who I asked, they were not explaining it to me, and they just thought it was the funniest thing. The friend who was the leader of the group, he took me aside and he explained to me that what they loved about me was my naivety, and that was what made me sweet, and that was what made me kind, and in some weird way it made me a better person, because it was like I was uncorrupted by the world. Now, unfortunately, later on, this naivety would cost me greatly, and none of them would have been around to protect me. There was more going on with this story than just a boy having a crush on me and talking about me to the other guys, and me finding myself in this friend group. Going back to the previous video, I had to cut some things out because it was just so long of a video. But freshman year, I had got my first real boyfriend. He was also a grade ahead of me, and he was homeschooled. And I had only recently started to experience attention from boys. It started to go from being bullied and understanding that that meant that somebody had a crush on me, to now this person is nice to me. And that really made me fall quickly. It started out a little rocky. I actually had a crush on his friend, and his friend was how I met him. So that didn't really work out the best, but I was a freshman, he was a sophomore. What are you gonna do? 14 and 15. Neither one of us can even drive. But when I went to the public school and I made these new guy friends, I did not hide the fact that I had a boyfriend. They all knew that I had a boyfriend. But there was still a lot of pressure from them, because the leader was best friends with the one that had the crush on me, right? And so he kept trying to push me in that direction, and the leader developed a crush on one of my friends who was from my private school, because that next Friday, or whatever the next home game was, I brought her with me to that home game and introduced her to my friends. And because they liked each other, and he also wanted me to like his friend, even though I had a boyfriend. And so I started to feel really bad, because here he took me to the side and he was explaining that what they loved about me was my naivety, my sweetness, my pureness. And the way he explained it to me was that was actually what made me alluring. So knowing now the perspective of my friend, where he said that he felt like there was more attention to me because of the way he was talking and talking and talking, and that it made these guys get curious. This whole 18 years prior, I had thought that it was because I was naive, because I was innocent, because I was uncorrupted. This whole time, that's what I thought that it was. And I also simultaneously blamed myself for not being able to handle the attention better. So when it came to my boyfriend, my parents did not care for how serious he and I were getting. They did not care for the fact that we would say that we loved each other. They did not care for the late night conversations on the phone. They didn't care for some of my sneakier behavior to try to meet up with him places. They felt like I was too young to have that serious of a relationship. So several times my parents actually intervened and told us that we had to break up. And so I think the first time that we broke up, it was because my mom told me that she felt like it was too serious and they had wanted me to go ahead and break up with him. So I did. Then I started to realize that maybe my mom was right, and that high school was about having fun and not being tied down, and not keeping myself from having these really rich experiences with my friends, and having crushes on other people is okay. Yet I still loved my boyfriend, even though he wasn't allowed to be my boyfriend. Although I cared deeply for that one friend, he and I actually never ended up even dating. But he was the catalyst that opened up a lot of these other experiences. And I did. I ended up doing that whole dating this person for 2 weeks, or maybe having a crush on this person, and then my boyfriend and I got back together. And we tried to be secretive about it, and then we just, I don't know, reached a point where we didn't care, and our parents found out. And then I would get pressure, not necessarily pressure, I would get attention from other people, and it would pique my interest, and I never wanted to cheat, so we would break up again. And then I would hang out with this person, and I wouldn't date them necessarily, just wanted to experience the crush and see, does this go anywhere? And it never did. Of course, we're in high school. And there was one boy who started to pursue me, and I didn't feel the same way for him at first, but I'd gotten back together with my boyfriend, and I was very into my church group at the time, and I was doing youth group with like 3 different churches at one point, and I was really into that scene, and again, you know, trying to be a good Christian girl. And there was so much religious word vomit that I didn't even know, things that I would just say because I heard them said before. Now, this boy was the one I had talked about in the previous video, the one who was Jewish, and he liked me. And one of the very first things I said to him was, "Aren't you supposed to hate me?" And then I learned in that moment that Jewish people didn't hate Christians. And I felt like an idiot, as I should have. I say that, but there's not any judgment, truthfully, because, again, how could I have known what I was taught was untrue? The only exposure that I'd ever had, how could I have known until that moment that it wasn't true? It wasn't exactly a conversation that we had in my family. I didn't know it was something to even bring up and discuss and question at that time. But I remember thinking, because I'd heard it said at my church, that he must be attracted to Christ in me, that there's no way he would actually like me. I had a boyfriend, and if he's pursuing me, then it's not actually me that he liked, but it was Jesus in me that he was attracted to. I know, cringe. I'm sorry. It just, ugh. And he was patient, and he was like, "Nope, I'm pretty sure it's you that I like." But I was convinced. I was absolutely convinced. No, it's not me that you like. It's Jesus. It's clearly Jesus that you like in me. That's the answer to it. And it ended up being this weird triangle for a year, 18 months, something like that. And just going this back and forth and back and forth. And finally, after so long, after him pursuing me, knowing I had a boyfriend, and me just being persistent for a while, and then also this weird, my boyfriend and I would break up again, and then me and this guy would kiss, and I knew there was feelings there, but again, I truly believed that it wasn't me that he wanted, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be with him. And I think this was junior year, so it was my junior year of their senior year. It's high school drama. Finally, that summer, I realized the feelings that I had for him. And where I had been not the only female in my group of friends, but one of very few for a very long time, at this point, my friend group had expanded and it was almost 50-50 male and female. And I was trying to get closer to one of the newer girls in our group. And although I didn't like her, for some reason I felt like if I confided in her, then maybe that would create a bond between us and we could be friends. Well, by the time I finally decided that I felt the same way about this guy, and I had broken it off with my boyfriend, and I was going to choose him, I was about to go on vacation with my family. We were going to go to Hawaii for a week. I'd never been to Hawaii before, and I was so excited to go to Hawaii for the first time. And so the night before we left, a lot of us were hanging out, and the guy is there. And I don't know why I didn't say anything to him, because I had already broken up with my boyfriend, and in my mind I had already chosen him. But I didn't convey that for whatever reason. I guess because I was about to leave for vacation. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. So I confide in this girl, and I tell her I'm choosing him. And I tell her, like, after all this time, I realized how much he means to me, and I'm choosing him. And I'm sure you can figure out what happened. I came back from Hawaii and he is dating her. That night after I left, she had, I guess, confessed her feelings for him. They dated for about 2 weeks. About what was normal for high school back then, you know, if you weren't really serious. But I remember I found out when I finally went to tell him that I had chosen him, that I had realized that I had feelings for him. And the way he treated me was like I was so morally corrupt. How dare I? That I had hurt him for so long and I had led him on for so long, which wasn't entirely untrue. However, he had also been pursuing me with the assistance of our group of friends the entire time that I had had a boyfriend as well. But I was the morally corrupt one. And pretty much his answer was too little too late. And I think, I can't say for sure, I can only speculate, but if I had to guess, it probably have felt good to say screw you after all of that. For him wanting to be with me and me really not knowing who I was or what I wanted. And I'm sure I did hurt him plenty of times. So yeah, it would probably feel really good to say, sorry, too little too late, you missed out. And I will tell you, it took me 15 years to get over that. And the reason it did is because I believed him. I believed that I deserved to be hurt. I believed that it was my fault. I believed that I had hurt him so much that there was just no coming back from that. Now, do I have any misconceptions and think that we would have gotten married and lived this fairy tale life? Absolutely not. It was high school. That relationship would never have lasted anyway. I'm fully aware of that. But what kept me, I guess, not pining, that's not the right word, but what made it so I couldn't get over that situation is the immense guilt that I had and the agreement with him that it was my fault. And it took me into my 30s to look back at the situation and understand that what he did wasn't okay and that it wasn't entirely my fault, because here I was being honest about being in a relationship, being pulled back and forth, and I had my part in it too, but I was not the morally corrupt one. None of us were. We were just immature kids. So instead, when it came time to graduate, so senior year, again, all of my friends were a year older than me. So my senior year, they were all either in the military or in college or going to community college or working. So I went back to the Christian private school. which again, reference my previous video. After that rejection, I ended up trying to go back with my boyfriend, and that was a bridge that I had pretty much burned. However, he and I had a gravity that I can't really describe. Yes, it was codependency, but it was such a strong gravitational pull, probably because he was my first everything, my first love, my first that. He and I ended up getting back together and breaking up a couple more times throughout my senior year. But he was going to go into the military as well. And so because of the fact that I struggled with reading, because of the fact that I was behind, because of the fact that I was back at that private school, and I just believed that it was like everything from before just came flooding back. Every stride I had made at public school to find who I was and start to come to terms with that, it's like I took a step backwards and almost all of that was lost. I definitely made things harder on myself because I had so much walls built up from the teachers and some of the students. My anger was still very much present, and the rebellion of wanting to show the person that everybody thought I was anyway. So I isolated myself. And senior year was pretty awful. I didn't even apply to a single college because I was just so sure that I would get rejected, and I couldn't bear getting a rejection letter. I just couldn't bear it. Simultaneously with all of this going on in the background, ever since puberty, so about the age of 12, 13, right when that angsty anger and rebellion was starting, unbeknownst to me, I had something called, and have something called PCOS. I didn't get diagnosed with PCOS until I was 30. Looking back now, it makes complete sense. But I was struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts. And I mean, really, like I would plan it and I would replan it, how I was going to do it, even pick out the music that I wanted playing in the background when people found my body. Like it was dark and it was almost all consuming. So I'm trying to balance these complicated relationships. I'm trying to balance being a good Christian. I'm trying to balance finding myself, and I'm trying to balance my anger at these people in this institution, and I don't know who the enemy is, and I don't know who to blame, and I'm just blaming myself. And I think that no matter what I do, I'm hurting somebody, because even that boy who was my first friend at the public school, I hurt him because I could never feel the same way for him that he felt for me. And I would hurt my boyfriend because I was breaking up with him because I didn't know who I was or what I wanted or different experiences that I wanted to have. And then I was hurting this other boy who liked me because I had a boyfriend, and then all of the, just random crushes and things like that happened within there as well. I felt like no matter what I did, I was hurting somebody. And even if I were to say, screw everybody and just choose myself, I'm still hurting everyone. So it was a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it was my grandmother who finally called it out when she recognized it in me. Unbeknownst to most of us, we had a very, very long family history of depression and suicide attempts on the female side of my mom's side. And my grandma, when she started to recognize the depression in me, she pretty much said enough is enough. And she started to talk about all the people that she knew in our bloodline who had killed themselves, or who had attempted to kill themselves, or who had wanted to kill themselves. And she told me this story about somebody who drove off a cliff at the beach, and how she was jealous of them for a long time. And at one point she'd actually packed up my mom and my aunt and uncle in a car when they were younger, and she intended on doing the same thing, and she thankfully couldn't do it at the end of the day, and she realized that she needed to get help. And I can't remember if she did. I want to say she probably didn't, because back then it was really taboo. You don't talk about mental health, you hid it. And I remember my mom was upset when she heard all of this, because my mom went through her junior high and high school and the rest of her life up to that point suffering in her own silence, and not realizing that it was intergenerational. And although I was always grateful that it stopped with me, that now I can talk to my kids, and we still didn't know what PCOS was. We had no idea. We just thought it was something in our bloodline, but we didn't know what caused it or anything. Knowing what I know now about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, you can Google it if you want to, but it causes a lot of things. It causes weight gain, it causes facial hair, it causes cysts, it causes cystic acne, it causes depression, and can cause suicidal thoughts. And there's many other symptoms. It can cause infertility and different things like that. PCOS is something that is not curable, so they say, and would make complete sense that it would go through generations. But again, I didn't get diagnosed with that, nor even find out about it. I never even heard about it until I was 30. And that didn't help me at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. So it's important to understand that there was a serious battle with my mental health simultaneously with all of these other pressures and things happening within my life at the time. But my perspective at that time is that the depression and the experiences were not linked. And so I still blamed myself for being this bad person that I thought that I was. And I blamed myself for struggling with reading, and I believed that I was unintelligent. I truly believed that my best chances in life were to marry somebody who could then take care of me, or to follow the leader of our group who went into the military. The recruiter told me that you could choose where you wanted to be stationed, and that although they would put you where it was needed, you did have a voice and you could request a certain base. So here I was in Oregon, and I knew that my friend had requested Fort Lewis in Washington, and so I was also going to request Fort Lewis in Washington, so that way we could at least hang out together. It was highly likely in my mind at the time that we could kind of resume our friend group as we continued to grow up. Because I felt that I was unintelligent and I believed that I didn't have any options, I never even applied for one school. And instead I joined the Army. And the guy who was my boyfriend that we kept breaking up with, he ended up joining the Army as well. Now, our last and final breakup was really dirty, really painful, really messy. We both said very hurtful things to each other, and that was that. I thought I would never see him again. So he went into the Army several months before I did, and I was ready to go that August. So I had graduated high school, and I had about 2 months to be crazy. And I was. I lived a lot in those 2 months. I had a lot of experiences, and I had a lot of fun. And I found myself in a lot of dangerous experiences that I don't really know how I got out of, but I did, and I was very lucky. Part of that, again, was the naivety. Part of that was I didn't care. And I was just trying to have as many experiences before I went into the Army as I possibly could. The next part of my story is going to go into what happened in the Army and then tie these two parts of the story together in what I learned and how I was able to forgive myself and overcome this part of the trauma. So I hope so far this has been, at least if nothing else, entertaining. Maybe this resonates with you, maybe it doesn't. But I ask that you please hang out for a few days till I post the next video. I hope that you're enjoying this little mini series so far. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.